I'm Kay Vaughn Baker, Kay Ella Vaughn Baker, born in Port Arthur, Texas, on the Gulf Coast. Port Arthur was a very small community as such, very large acreage, very much like the Hearst area, the Hearst Euless Bedford area. We were all very active in the community. My grandmother, Grace Kay was her married name, grandmother was a teacher. Many of our relatives were in education. My family had been in Port Arthur. As a matter of fact, my mother was raised in Port Arthur as well. We were both in a drum and bugle corps. Of course, mother in the 30s and me in the 60s. And my grandmother even taught in the school area. My dad was in sales there in Port Arthur, but being a refining town, he was also in sales of equipment, welding equipment. He was a welder for the refinery there. Port Arthur was a mecca for oil, refineries, and so we grew up in that manner. We actually had 3 generations there in the Port Arthur area, so I couldn't get away with very much because everybody knew who I was and knew my family, so it was fun. My dad's side, my grandmother Bolton was a one-room school teacher. I remember going there as a small child and seeing her desks all lined up. And she actually, of course, they didn't have kindergarten at that time, but she had grades 1 through 12. And I always wondered how in the world she did that. But she was a very lovely lady, a very educated lady. And both of my grandmothers, being educators, was very, very nice. Grandmother Kay, my mother's mother, was one of the first to be acknowledged with special needs students, writing the curriculum for that, actually for the state of Texas. She's written up in the Golden Book, and I know that Grandmother Bolton would have been too, had there been a wonderful Golden Book for her as well. Art was my very favorite subject, and I took a lot of writing and journalism, that type of thing. Even in college, I majored in art, minored in English, and of course got my education degree. But I've always enjoyed art type things. I graduated from Thomas Jefferson High School in Port Arthur, Texas in 1958, and immediately started college at University of North Texas during that summer. I had met my husband, John Duffy Baker Sr., from Hamilton, Texas, when I was 16, up in Fort Worth visiting, even though he was from Hamilton. So I was eager to get to North Texas, and we really had a good time there at North Texas. He actually had 1 year of dental school. He was in the science area. I majored in art. They had an excellent fine arts program there at the University of North Texas. I graduated in January of 1962. We married in February of 1962. My husband went to Baylor Dental College in Dallas, and I interviewed and started teaching in the HEB area. They did not have elementary art teachers, and I was hired as an elementary art teacher, which I was capable of working with. But I had 4 schools a month, North Euless, South Euless, Oakwood Terrace, and Stonegate. I put my brushes in the car and my painting in the car and whatever I needed for the students, and I went from school to school. Didn't know any better and thought that was the way to go and loved it. I had grades 4 through 6th in elementary, and then on my time off, I worked with 1 through 3, which was a fun blessing. At that age, particularly the lower grades, they'll paint a purple cow and think it's great, and I thought it was great too. Pat May was working with the elementary curriculum, and I worked with her very carefully because we really didn't have a structured program at that time. And there were 4 of us. I was the youngest. that worked with the curriculum in setting out a curriculum for the elementary grades. She was a hands-on individual. She was out in the community, out in the schools. That's what was needed, and I very much admired her for that. We moved to Euless, and that's where we started. Euless was a lot of the pioneers, and I'm going to call them founding fathers, but I didn't really ever feel like they were old. They were young, they were industrious, they were a very giving group. The Byers that had the lumber yard, the Anders who had the home that we rented from, the Souders, which Bill Souder was not only a mayor of Hurst at one time, but our postmaster. So it was all an interconnection as such, which was very, very nice. Not a lot of building as far as commercial buildings were concerned. We were married there in the First Methodist Church there actually in Hurst, and worked with Bert Heil, who owned Western Hills Inn. Now, Western Hills Inn was a new, wonderful, lovely place, the only place to have a reception as such, and that's where we planned our wedding reception. And when Mother and I walked into Western Hills to meet Bert Heil, who owned it, we were talking about colors and such, and I looked out in the lobby, and it was orange. All of it was orange furniture. And so went back up to talk with with Bert Heil, and he said, "You don't worry about that." And do you know that good man took that orange furniture out of his lobby completely and got new beige furniture in there. Now, it didn't stay in there long. That orange furniture came back. We didn't have any malls. We had a few restaurants. CA's was a restaurant that all of us we loved it. And C.A. Sanford was a big planner of the Hurst area and a big proponent of working with the community. And he was a very, very fine person, had an excellent restaurant. And that was kind of a meeting place for us. I'm confident that the 9 months that I was pregnant with Marjorie, I wanted chicken livers. And C.A. Sanford had chicken livers on his menu. So Mother and I were right there together, enjoyed being together, and we enjoyed going to C.A.'s every day for chicken livers for me. The lumberyard, the Byers. The Byers were, again, a pioneer family, but a young family. And the Byers had a large lumber company. Actually, it was in Euless at that time. There is still a lumber yard in Euless as such. So it went way, way back. But I think one of the nicest things for me and for my husband and myself was to watch Hurst grow. Because from just a few restaurants, well, CA's and maybe two others, drive-in type things, and then some of the businesses popping up that was just great. Cooper's Florist. Now, that was, at that time, the only florist that I recall in town. And Cooper's Florist is still there on Pipeline. Bell Helicopter, you see, is also in Hurst. And that was a very large growing spurt for our area as well. The second year he was in dental school, he came in. His dad had been a dentist. His dad before him had been a dentist. And he said, I'm going to finish this course, but I don't think I'm ever going to want to practice. And I said, oh, dear, we're almost starving to death, John. I was teaching. I was the only income coming in at that time. And he said, no, I just don't think I'd be happy in an office all day long. So consequently, we talked about what he thought he might like to do. And yes, he was an entrepreneur. We had, and I say we because I've always felt like our family was a unit as such. We were a pretty good team together. In fact, we were a good team together, actually, for those 52 years. I lost him 3 years ago Now, of our 52 years of marriage, 52 were spent in not only in the Hurst-Euless Bedford area, but over 50 years in Hurst. Hurst was, we moved to Hurst in 1964, and it was very natural for us to look into business adventures and this type of thing in Hurst. We built the first luxury apartment house in Hurst, the Colonial Apartments. We lived there, we owned them and managed them for several years. We had efficiency 1, 2, and 3 bedroom apartments, and they were very sought after. We had what was called Venetian marble in the bathrooms, which was a real treat. Then we had brick kitchens. All of our appliances were built in, the stoves and the ovens and what have you were built into brick. It was patterned after a home, actually, and it was quite a treat to meet people as such. I'll tell you a cute story about the Colonial Apartments. One night, it was just after dark, that I got a call from one of the couples in the efficiency apartment. And they said, "Miss Baker, come quick, there's sparks in my kitchen." Oh, so I grabbed up Marjorie and ran over there. And as I walked in the door, I didn't smell smoke. And so I said, "Oh, I don't see sparks." And the young lady said, "Let me turn the light off and you'll see them." Well, she turned the light off and I saw what she was calling sparks. They were Texas-sized lightning bugs. She had never seen anything like that. So, not to make her feel bad, I said, "Let me have a clear glass, if you will." "Do you want water, Miss Baker?" No, I just want a clear glass." So we caught some of those bugs, and we put them in the glass, put my hand on the top. I said, "Now turn off the light." And, they glowed, and they had fun with that. But I felt like that not only having the apartments being a service type thing to the community, it was an earning thing for us as well. But I got to meet a lot of people. We also had a service station with a very active mechanical bay where we serviced cars and fixed cars and that type of thing. And then later on, we had a pawn shop on Highway 10. So I felt like that we were very active in the community, both through business and friendships. The apartments were on Norwood, right off of Pipeline Road. They still are there. And the service station, it was a Shell station, was a block down the street. It is not there any longer. There's a restaurant there where it was. And then the pawn shop was on Highway 10. Our social life in the Hurst-Euless Bedford, but essentially in Hurst, was actually built around our churches and the activities that we had. Wednesday night were very big things because the youth had usually a youth meeting and then dinner and then a short church service. We all went to church on Sunday. Didn't make any difference which church it was. And sometimes we had Methodists that came to our Baptist church and such. And then we had the schools that were very progressive. There were not a lot of meeting places in the Hurst-Euless Bedford area at that time, but there were schools. The auditoriums were used, the libraries were used, that type thing for various meetings. And we had wonderful dances there at Bell High School. And we had our own DJs and everything set up and just really had a good time. And the kids looked forward to that. The Oakcrest Women's Club was one of the first ladies' organizations in Hurst. And it was just a delight to see women meeting. We had different departments. For instance, we had an interior decorating department. We had an area of cooking with recipes. We had a design department. I was very fortunate to work in the interior decorating department because my family was in the Hurst area. My mother and I were members of the Oakcrest Women's Club, and we worked together in that very venue. The Oakcrest Women's Club was probably, it was in this area for at least 40 years. Bill Saller was one of the first pioneers that I recall. Again, Bill was not what we call an older person. He was a young, enthusiastic member of the community. He was our postmaster as well as our mayor. His wife was very, very active in the school district, and actually she was on our Board of Education. When the doors opened at Bell High School, Bill and Dodie Souter were right there to support us. So they were very, very active at that time in the Hearst area. Later, the different ones that became on the Swearingens and the such on the city council became very, very active as such. I feel like that both the school board and the city council and the city officers worked very, very well together in Hearst to see that playgrounds and ball fields were built. And they did a beautiful job of planning as such. We had another gentleman that by the name of Newell Odell, who was a superintendent, actually when I started in 1962 in the school district. Newell Odell bought a lot of property for the school district. And I remember at that time, some of the community residents were just almost up in arms because money was being spent on all that property. Well, that property was put to good use. In the schools, for instance, Trinity High School was the first school, to my knowledge, at least in the state of Texas, that had a college campus arrangement. Every department was a different building. Don Brown, I worked under two principals, A.J. Sales and Don Brown. I was at Bell High School. Of the 40 years when I retired from the school district, I was at Bell High School under A.J. Sales for a few years, but primarily under Don Brown, a fine professional educator. His theory was if it's good for kids, it's what we'll do. And that's what we did. And he was progressive, he was visionary, and consequently, we had a lot of advantages at Bell High School. We hosted the 1978 National Student Council Conference, had 2,200 students in from all over the United States. Now, this is how the community really came in and helped us out. These students were housed in community homes and for 3 days. And now all they needed to do was simply to have a bed for them, transportation for them. But when we let the churches and the various organizations know that we were going to have these young leaders come in, they opened up their minds and hearts and homes, and we really appreciated that. For several years, I was just a mother and thoroughly enjoyed our children as they were young. Marjorie was born in 1964, our son John in 1966. In 1970, I began the art program at Bell High School. Again, it was a fun course. My whole theory was we're going to draw today. Now you can carve that pencil up and make a collage, or you can draw on that paper. But let me show you what we can do and the fun and the beauty of what we can design. Taught for 4 years, and A.J. Sales, my principal, came to me and said, we need a dean of students, a disciplinarian. And I said, Mr. Sales, I love my art. Thank you very much for thinking of me. And he said, no, I'm not just thinking of you. That's what I'd like for you to do. Going back to my roots with my grandmother Kay, who was a teacher, she just instilled within me that a good teacher had to be firm and fair and innovative. So that's what I did as a dean of students. Now, you must remember, in that time, women were not selected that often as administrators. In fact, we were not called an assistant principal. We were called deans of students. In fact, there were only about 9 in the whole state at that time. And we made our way, and we made a place for ourselves, and it was delightful. The one thing that I went into Mr. Sales' office with was, I really I don't mind the discipline, but I want a good balance. I want to work with another organization or student council. And that worked into my joint job of discipline and student activities. We wound up with 70 organizations on the LD Bell campus. I felt like that any student that was active and interested needed to take a place and find a place on that campus. So we had everything from Domino Club and Key Club and Honor Society and a fishing society. Yes. I became very, very interested in leadership, having been a part of the National Principals Association in Reston, Virginia. You have to also know that my principal, E. Don Brown, was president of that association for several years. That's when I was interim principal at Bell High School while he was away. I felt like that leadership was very, very important. To learn to plan, organize, implement, and evaluate were life skills. And I looked at leadership as being a life skill for a student. Of the student council organization, we had a meeting every week, and I felt like that they needed to learn how to plan for these meetings so that they would be, we only had 35 or 40 minutes for those meetings, and they needed to be productive, and they were productive because we planned them. And the best way was to meet in the evenings, and everyone was going, all these kids were going different places. So at 8 o'clock, I had a meet at my house. I had a large table in what we called our playroom. We worked at that large table. Kids will eat anything. And I would go in very quickly and whip up a cake and put it in the oven, ice it. It was warm when they got there, and that was their treat. Or if I found that they needed a sandwich, and my husband was an excellent cook as well, and he did a lot of cooking for the kids as well. Student council was an arm of activity for the entire school. We hosted breakfasts for the faculty. We had 104 on the faculty at that time. So we had a breakfast twice a month. A friend of mine by the name of Dr. June Jacoby, who I'm sorry to say is no longer with us, but June and I proposed what we call the Bell Craft Fair. And we sold space, exactly what we did, an 8x10 space. Student council would go in and mark off an 8x10 space, and we had crafters that rented it. My gracious, we'd have hundreds on our campus, and it was a wonderful way for student council to be active. Today, even, that craft fair is full, and it's just a wonderful thing. It was my idea to have baccalaureate and have dessert for baccalaureate. Have a free-flowing fountain at baccalaureate. That was in our auditorium where parents came. Well, we set up out in the courtyard. By that afternoon, the wind had picked up. The wind had blown the punch completely out of the flowing fountain, so that was not successful. The flower arrangements never stayed on the tables. And I looked around. The chocolate that we had from some of the desserts was all over the kids' gowns. We're not going to do that again. I recall a wonderful activity at Bell High School. I was arrested one day. The police came in and handcuffed me and said, "Miss Baker, you're under arrest." Well, I felt like something was probably up, but I said I'd play along with it, I thought. And I did, and I was put in the police car, and I said, "Why don't you drive down?" "Where are we going?" "Well, we're going to the mall. That's where our jail is, and we're going to put you in jail." And I said, "Well, why don't you drive by my house? I'd like for my husband to see this." And so we did drive by the house, and luckily he was out watering the yard. So I had him roll down the window, because I was handcuffed. I had him roll down the window, and I hollered, "Duff, look, they're taking me to jail." Well, he was evidently in on it, because he said, "Take her and just keep her, just keep her." But the community and the students were involved too. They had to contribute money, pool their money to get me out of jail, because that went to one of the charities in Hurst. I was actually in the Hurst-Euless-Bedford district for right at 40 years. 26 of those years I spent at L.D. Bell High School. Then another segment of time, they needed a director for public relations in the central office. At the time, I hated again to leave those students, but I did go to the central office as director for public relations. Loved it. Ron Kalos was the superintendent at that time, and I remember so well him saying, "There are two things I want you to do, Miss Baker. Number one, we need to pass a bond issue." And it was one of the largest in Texas. Now, we passed it, but it was very, very carefully done. I remember Dr. Kalos saying, "I want to give programs throughout the community." And I said, "Sir, how many?" "As many as you can set up." I set up 110. He said, 110? My gracious. And I said, "Well, we can get our administration up here in the central office. We can involve our principals. We can involve our board. So we can do that." And so we made little presentations as well as larger presentations in the elementary PTAs as such for promoting the bond issue. And it passed, and it was a treat. The second thing, he said, "I want you to be in everything in this community." Well, that didn't bother me a bit. I was delighted to be in Rotary and on the Chamber of Commerce board, on the boards for the hospital and such. And every meeting I went to, I took something of our school district, what we were doing, what the students were doing, the achievements that were made in all areas, academic, athletic. But it was a way to let folks know what was going on in the school district. We had a program where we invited the elderly. Now, I'm elderly, and I understand that, so I say that with quite a smile. But those that were retired, to come and have breakfast with us. And so many of our students, that's where they ate breakfast every morning. And they would mingle around and visit with the students, or they might help them, tutor them in some way. Another way that we could bring the community on our campus and invite them, and they served a very worthwhile purpose. I did not really retire, yet I did. I started, they wanted a director for the Pat May Center. Pat May was honored with a little, I'm going to call it a mini convention center. We didn't have the Hurst Convention Center at that time. And we had, this was a wonderful building that looked like a little convention center. It was, we had 3 different rooms that would open up for a large group. On the other hand, that was a means of teaching teachers computers, for instance. So there were actually mandatory hours that they were given, either having a substitute in their classroom for a short time while they would come to the Pat May Center and learn the computers. And then in turn, we had a lot of meetings there that were both in school and out of school. That was very, very good. You must remember back in those times, we didn't have a lot of meeting places. We hosted a lot of council meetings in our library. Don Brown would fix homemade ice cream, and Robbie Busby would bring some too. And then we'd have just treats for them of that sort. And different organizations would use our building, our library, for their meetings. So when we had the Pat May Center, named after that lovely lady, we started hosting a lot of things there, and it was very, very well used and well traveled, both during the week and on the weekends as well. And I enjoyed organizing that. When I retired in the early 2000 from the Hurst Euless Bedford area, I was contacted by an old friend of mine, Terrence J. Giroux, Terry Giroux, who at that time was head of the Horatio Alger Association for Outstanding Americans. This was a group of men and women that had a primary interest in seeing that young people received an education. Today, they give $22 million a year to promise financially at-risk students, give them an opportunity to further their education. I have been an independent contractor for the Horatio Alger Association for the past 17 years. That was one of the responsibilities I had, contacting junior colleges, community colleges, and letting them know that we had tuition available for those students from age up to 30 years of age, whether they had gotten a four-year degree and they needed more training or such. So it has been very, very popular. That's what I was doing. But I also evaluate our national scholarships, and it has just been a delight. For instance, last week I reviewed 100 applications for scholarships. I am the Texas advisor or the Texas director for Horatio Alger. We have one or two in every state that work with the schools, that let them know that these scholarships are available. We married in 62. Our first child, Marjorie Kay, was born in 64. And by that time, we had moved into the apartments, and her nursery was there. And it was just a delightful thing to have. She was always a very mature little girl because she was around adults so much, in and out and that type of thing. I was very, very pleased to see an article that was written about my daughter. They live in Allen, Texas. She is an officer at the Allen Outreach Association. They feed, clothe, and assist hundreds of families every year. And someone asked her in an interview that was stated in the paper, "Where did you get your giving?" And I was just so pleased that she said it was my mother and dad. She said, "My mother was a very giving person, and you never left our home unless my dad didn't leave you with food." Our son came along, John Duffy Baker II, came along in 1966. Our son is a builder and quite a giver as such. I remember going to a Christmas party where my son was involved, and one of his good friends came up to me and said, "Do you know what a fine person your son is?" And I said, "Well, I'm very prejudiced, but yes, I do." And he said, "Had it not been for your son, we would not have had food and presents this past year. Did you know that?" And I said, "No, but I'm delighted that he was able to do that." John does that a great deal in giving of his time, giving of his efforts as such. And I hope that came from the path that we put them on. The Hurst Euless Bedford community, and essentially the Hurst community, because that's where we have lived more than 50 years, have always been a very progressive, visionary area for me. They made me feel like maybe they needed me, and I liked that very, very much. They were friendly. They were warm in opening their hearts and their homes to new ideas, to new things, to become active. And that made me want to be more active in the community and to give of whatever I had to give to the community. My passion has always been young people. I thoroughly enjoyed working with the elementary age. I did student teaching in the junior high age. But high school is my very favorite. I felt like that because maybe I could be instrumental in helping a young person grow up strong and healthy and wise and productive, that other people in our community could do the same. I've always loved to paint. I don't paint as much as I'd like to paint. But if I painted a picture of Hurst, I would use bright colors, lots of yellows, lots of inspiring greens, yet I would use some browns for the rooting and the very, very fine, solid foundation that Hurst gives you. The sky to me is always blue with lots of clouds in it in Hurst. It is it's been my desire to stay here and my dream to be here. And I choose and always want to be right here in Hurst, Texas.